I never believed mirrors could hold anything more than reflections, but that belief shattered the day we moved into the old Ravenshaw estate, a decaying Victorian house rumored to have been abandoned for decades after a tragedy no one in town liked to talk about. The whispered fragments, the girl in the glass, the one who never blinked, the mirrors that breathed, floated around like dust in the wind. The house itself was massive, with winding hallways, towering ceilings, and too many rooms to count. But the strangest part was the number of mirrors inside, hundreds of them, all shapes and sizes, covering nearly every wall, some cracked, some cloudy, some polished as if cleaned every day by invisible hands. And though my parents dismissed them as old furniture left by the previous owners, I felt an unease twist deep in my stomach each time I caught my reflection staring back at me a second too long. My younger sister, Leah, 9 years old and endlessly curious, seemed drawn to them in a way that made my skin crawl. She would stand for minutes in front of random mirrors, tilting her head, whispering softly as if holding a conversation with someone I couldn't see. And when I asked who she was talking to, she would smile, a slow, strange smile, and say, "My friend in the glass," before running off giggling, leaving me staring at my own reflection, which for a horrifying heartbeat, didn't move. When I did, it started small, the kind of things you could explain away if you tried hard enough. In the first week, I noticed that my reflection blinked late or not at all. Sometimes my reflection's eyes looked darker than mine, hollow in a way that felt hungry. Leah's behavior grew worse, more secretive. She spent hours locked in her room, which had an enormous antique mirror covering one entire wall. At night, I heard her whispering to it, soft at first, then louder, angry, pleading, laughing, crying, her voice changing tones like she was conversing with multiple people. Once, when I pressed my ear to the door, I heard another voice, a faint, breathy whisper like the sound of wind trapped inside a bottle. When I pushed open the door, the whisper stopped instantly, and Leah stood facing the mirror with her head tilted unnaturally far to the right, as if the bones in her neck had softened. She turned to me slowly, eyes wide and pupils dilated, and asked, "Why did you interrupt?" She was about to show me something. I asked who she was, but Leah shook her head sharply. "She only talks when you're gone." The way she said it made my skin prickle. It wasn't bratty or childish, it was resentful, almost possessive, like she didn't want me anywhere near her newfound companion. The more days passed, the more I felt watched. Not by cameras or people, but by reflections that moved slightly when I wasn't looking directly at them, reflections that seemed to store emotions I wasn't feeling, reflections that seemed to breathe. Once, I saw something behind me in a mirror, something pale and long-haired standing just inches away, but when I spun around, nothing was there. When I looked back at the mirror, my reflection smirked, though I was certain my face was expressionless. I tried telling my parents, but they dismissed it as stress from moving, though my mother seemed uneasy too and avoided the mirrors after dusk. My father insisted everything was fine until the night he found Leah standing in the hallway at 3 a.m., staring into a tall, narrow mirror with her hands pressed against the glass. When he touched her shoulder, she shrieked like someone had stabbed her, then turned around and said in a flat voice, "You scared her. She doesn't like being watched." After that incident, my parents removed the mirror from Leah's room, but the next morning, it was back, standing in the exact same spot, polished immaculately, though no one had touched it. My father swore angrily, dragged the mirror outside, smashed it with a hammer, and threw the pieces into the trash bin. That night, when I went to get water, I nearly screamed. The same mirror was standing in the hallway again, fully intact, not a crack anywhere. And Leah was sitting cross-legged in front of it, smiling at her reflection. She came back, she whispered to me. She always comes back. The house grew colder, not physically but atmospherically. The air felt thick, heavy, as if something unseen filled the space between us and our reflections. Lights dimmed around mirrors, no matter how bright the bulbs were. Shadows warped. Sometimes I'd see figures behind me that didn't exist outside the glass, pale hands reaching for my shoulders, a face leaning over mine, long strands of hair brushing the back of my neck, though no one was there. Worst of all were the whispers, soft, feminine, coaxing, calling my name from the mirrors whenever I passed by, tempting me to come closer. Once, I almost did, my feet moving on their own before I snapped out of it. Leah worsened rapidly. She stopped eating properly, Her eyes sunk deeper, and she avoided sunlight entirely. Her skin turned pale, almost translucent. She told me her friend's name, Ilara, and said Ilara had been trapped in the mirrors for years, waiting for someone who could hear her. I asked what that meant, and Leah told me Ilara didn't want to be alone anymore. She wants to come out, Leah whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and excitement. And she wants me to help her. I begged Leah to stop talking to whatever was inside those mirrors, but she looked at me with a strange sadness. I can't stop, she said. She gets angry when I ignore her. She shows me things. I asked what kind of things, and Leah's eyes filled with tears. Things she's done to people who broke their promises. After that, I couldn't sleep. Every night, I heard tapping from the mirrors, light at first, then louder, insistent, rhythmic like fingernails against glass. Tap. 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 One night, I saw a handprint appear on the inside of my mirror, small, delicate, and slowly sliding down as if something inside was pressing against it. When I screamed, the handprint vanished instantly. My parents tried to keep us away from the mirrors, but it was impossible. They were everywhere, and every time we covered one or took it down, it would reappear somewhere else. The house wanted them there. Or something did. Then came the night everything ended. I woke up around midnight to absolute silence, the kind of silence that feels alive, vibrating with something waiting. When I looked around, I noticed something wrong immediately. Every mirror in my room was covered by a thin layer of mist, as if someone had breathed on them. Slowly, words began forming on the glass, written from the inside, "Come to her." I froze. Then I heard it, the soft, sing-song voice of a child humming from the hallway. Leah. I rushed out of my room and followed the humming, which grew louder, distorted, echoing unnaturally off the walls. It led me to the old storage room, one of the only rooms without a mirror. Or so we thought. When I opened the door, my breath caught in my throat. Leah was standing barefoot in front of a massive mirror that hadn't been there before, taller than the doorway, its frame carved with strange symbols that hurt my eyes to look at. Her reflection was smiling broadly, but Leah wasn't smiling. In fact, Leah's expression was blank, slightly terrified. It was the reflection that was moving on its own. Leah? I whispered. She didn't look at me. Instead, her reflection reached out and pressed its hand against the inside of the glass. Leah lifted her hand involuntarily, finger by finger, mirroring the reflection's movements as if puppet. When her hand touched the mirror, the glass rippled like water. I lunged toward her, screaming, but the mirror's surface exploded outward in a burst of icy wind, sending me crashing against the wall. Through the shimmering haze, I watched in horror as the reflection stepped out of the mirror, not as a flat image, but as a real girl. She looked exactly like Leah but wrong, her eyes too wide, her smile too sharp, her movements too fluid, like she was floating rather than walking. She touched Leah's face with cold, translucent fingers. Leah whimpered, collapsing to her knees. The reflection leaned down, pressing her forehead to Leah's. Their shadows merged on the floor, twisting, merging like ink. Leah screamed. I scrambled to my feet and charged toward them, but the reflection whipped her head toward me, her neck cracking unnaturally, and with a flick of her wrist, a force slammed me into the wall again, pinning me. She promised she'd let me out, the reflection whispered, her voice layered with multiple tones. And now she must stay in my place. Leah's body convulsed violently as the reflection began sinking into her, merging with her like smoke being inhaled. Leah's eyes rolled back, her skin going pale as frost formed at her fingertips. I yelled her name again and again, but she couldn't hear me. The mirror behind them pulsed like a heartbeat, glowing brighter until it became a blinding white void. Then, just as suddenly, the light went out. Silence. Leah collapsed onto the floor, shaking violently. The reflection was gone. The mirror turned black, like a dead screen. I ran to my sister and pulled her into my arms. She was ice cold. Her eyes fluttered open, but something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Her pupils were too dark, swallowing the color of her irises. I whispered, Leah? She blinked once. Twice. Slowly. Too slowly. Then she smiled, a sharp, unnatural smile. "She's with me now," she whispered. "She likes it here." I stumbled back in horror. "Leah, no, please." But she stood up with movements that weren't her own, fluid, graceful, predatory. The mirror behind her shimmered faintly, showing not our reflections, but a dark, endless corridor stretching into nothingness. "Leah, no." The thing inside Leah turned to me and tilted her head. "There's room for you too," she murmured. I fled. I ran out of the room, down the hallway, through the front door, barefoot and sobbing. Behind me, I heard laughter, childlike, echoing, layered, haunting. I didn't stop running until I reached the forest outside our property. I hid there until sunrise. When I finally returned with police, the house was empty. My parents were gone. Leah was gone. But the mirrors remained, every single one polished, pristine, glowing faintly as if whispering secrets. They searched for days but found nothing, not a footprint, not a single piece of evidence that anyone had ever lived there. But I know what happened. I know where Leah is. Sometimes, late at night, I see her in reflections, in shop windows, in car mirrors, in puddles on the street. She smiles with that same too wide smile, her eyes dark and hungry. And behind her stands Ilara, pale and silent, watching me with cold fascination, waiting for the moment I get too close to a mirror, waiting for the moment I finally let my guard down. Because they want me. And mirrors never forget.